Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ASQ LED webinar. I'm Ellen Ermer. We have Manny Veloso and Lance Coleman, our presenter. We're looking forward to this webinar, and we appreciate your patience in the delay. The typical technical difficulties that all of us, I think, have experienced. So we appreciate your patience. I just have a couple quick slides to go over as I tell you a little bit about this webinar and how you get credits, etc. So, sorry, give me a moment. And again, we have today successfully implementing Lean in a COVID-19 world, and that's presented by Lance Coleman. We have myself, Ellen Ermer, and Manny Veloso as the organizers. Our next webinar will be March 10th, and that topic will be turning data into dollars, presented by Jay Arthur. So please register for that. Just as a reminder, you will get a certificate of attendance. It will be emailed to you directly. So just please wait patiently. It's about 24 hours after this webinar is completed. And just a little review on the panel, the controls that you have to your right side. This is a listen-only webinar. If you have questions, we really encourage you highly to type in your questions, and then we will be bringing those up. I'll be asking those, presenting those to Lance, and he will answer those. If you need to send a message, you can send a chat, also privately or to the group. So Lance Coleman has many, many years of leadership experience in the areas of lean implementation, quality, and risk management in several industries, medical device, aerospace. He has a degree in electrical engineering technology from Southern Polytech, Marietta, Georgia. He's also an active member of the American Society for Quality, as well as a certified quality auditor, Six Sigma Green Belt, and supplier quality professional, and the author of 3 books. So I want to turn this over now to Lance, and welcome him to the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you are in the world. And I see my deck is just about up. So today what we're going to talk about is implementing Lean during COVID-19. And the reason that this presentation came about is I read an article in the Wall Street Journal back in the fall, maybe September, October, where basically an author who was obviously not very familiar with Lean was throwing Lean under the bus. Well, the reason we're having all these supply chain problems is because companies are too lean. They've embraced this Lean thing. As a matter of fact, they even mentioned that thanks to Lean, one company was able to ramp up in the short term production by 25%, yet it still couldn't touch the greater than 200% uptick in sales that they needed to address. Now, when once I stopped screaming at the article and really thought about it, I asked myself, well, what company wouldn't want the ability to ramp up 25% on short notice in order to meet demand? And those are the kind of efficiencies that Lean allows you. There are some impediments to implementing Lean during this COVID environment, which we'll get into. But the reason I put together the presentation was to look at all of the different ways that Lean can contribute to successful operations during a COVID-19 environment. This slide here is just a little bit about my background, but enough about me. If we can forward to the next slide. So what are we going to cover? Why now? Why lean? Why now? What are the benefits of doubling down on lean if you're already implementing it, or to begin implementation if you're not far along that journey? We want to dispel some common misconceptions about lean, and then we're going to discuss best practices in implementing lean remotely, and we'll close out with some Q&A. Next slide, please.
So Lance, you should be controlling this yourself now.
Okay,
So I'm not touching my keyboard anymore. So you should be able to do everything you need.
all right. Let me just make sure the controls are working.
Just a comment.
I'll take care of it.
Okay, thank you.
So we talked about some common misconceptions, how going lean can streamline too much so you're not responsive, or leaning out the organization means cutting back on manpower unnecessarily. That is not at all what lean is about. Lean is about doing more with less in a shorter period of time. And that's a recipe for success in any environment. Now, there are some actual true impediments to implementing lean during COVID-19. And let's look at those. And we'll talk about how to work around them. So going to Gemba, an important tenet, or Gemba, of course, is where work is accomplished. And so you want to go where the action is, where work is happening, so that you can gain profound knowledge on your processes, where your subject matter experts reside, that you can tap into if you need to address a risk or drive an improvement. COVID-19 reality, well, so many people are working remotely. There's limited access to certain work areas. You've had to, in some cases, realign the work cells, which can be disruptive of the workflow. Another common tool or practice within Lean is that it's very tactile. I mean, you're not typing information up on the floor on a computer. You're writing things on a Post-it. You're handwriting notes. And of course, there are some deviations from this, but still, Lean is still a very much hands-on, interactive, tactile practice. You write notes on Post-its and put them up on a board. So with all of the writing that typically is a part of Lean practice, well, we're trying to minimize touching. So you're not, handing a Post-it from one person to another, eliminating paper, which can carry germs and so forth. So there is that consideration to take into account regarding the handwriting practices of Lean. Interviewing process owners and stakeholders. Again, these are your subject matter experts, and they are the ones that are going to help you identify risk, going to help you drive improvement. Their knowledge of the process that they work within is going to be critical to success. And yet, COVID-19 requires social distancing, minimizing interaction, the wearing of masks, so it's more difficult to communicate. And these are all necessities, but how do we work around them? Daily management, huddle boards, whatever you maybe want to call them. those daily, those short-term daily meetings of the management staff and of various departments to review metrics and go over goals for the day, bring up hot topics or issues. And again, we have social distancing, as needed only access to certain areas. How do you implement that successfully in this environment? You know, minimizing the number of people in a given room or a given area. And then, of course, one of the primary goals of Lean is to maximize efficiency through the elimination of process waste. Well, COVID-19 is driving us in the opposite direction. You could argue that many operations are less efficient due to the lower density of personnel and equipment in work areas, or skipping certain work benches or work cells so that people aren't working too closely together. Or if you do put up barriers, then that's one more item within the environment that you have to work around. So COVID-19 is just making us develop work areas that aren't efficient in how they are run. But we're going to talk about how to deal with all of those. Now, our first polling question: how has COVID-19 affected your Lean implementation?
Thank you, Lance. So I'm going to release a poll and we'll give you some time to answer it.
Sorry, Ellen, I jumped the gun a little bit
Oh,
and
okay.
pulled out.
All right, great.
I'll let you take care of the others, though.
So we'll just give it a couple minutes. Thank you, Lance, for that initial introduction to the challenges of COVID. It'll be interesting to see what others have experienced in regards to their challenges, and maybe at the end, some of the things that they've also put in place to mitigate those challenges.
Yes, I'm very curious to hear that as well, because it's a learning process. We're all learning as we go and learning from each other.
Yes, whole new world. Okay, we've got about 68% voted. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Give it a minute, 70%, and then we'll release it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and release it. I am struggling with that. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Just tell me when to get rid of them.
Okay, so made adjustments. So almost half of you kept doing what you're doing. Excellent. Okay, it looks like 17% trying to figure out how to get it going. 5% put on hold, and then another 10% put it on hold until they could kind of figure things out. And of course, the 23% of you who weren't implementing Lean prior to COVID-19, hopefully this will give you some reasons to consider it. Okay, thanks, Manny. We can plow ahead now.
I just wanted to add a comment, Lance, from the audience, a question here. In response to my first poll, we've made adjustments for the virtual workplace, but it has been, in capitals, much more challenging. Virtually, value stream maps, and I understand this, are extremely challenging in a completely digital environment. And this person says, I miss my Post-it notes. I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. And, I still have them all over my wall at home. Using them in the work environment that is difficult. And of course, there's a a software app that has virtual post-its and there's a virtual whiteboard, and it's trial and error. All of them are helpful and kind of work, but it's not the same. So again, we're going to, as a group, figure out which applications work best, and also month to month, the software developers are improving their offerings. I mean, my company happens to use MS Teams, and this is not a promotion for MS Teams. It's just what we happen to use. We do use Zoom as well, but and it seems that about every month, MS Teams is adding some new feature or something to make it easier. So, I mean, at this point, we can just stay the course, keep sharing best practices, things that you struggle with in venues like this, at meetings, and see who has good ideas. I mean, we haven't really come up with anything great around value stream mapping to duplicate that effect, to be honest with you. It's more swim lane diagrams and process maps and that sort of thing, which of course is just, it's not the same. Okay, thanks for that comment.
Someone else suggested using an app in Teams called Mural, and I'm familiar with that. So I know there's a couple other apps out there.
Excellent, thanks for that tip. Okay, so now let's talk about the benefits of implementing Lean. If you're not doing it, why you should consider it, and if you are doing it, why you want to double down and figure out how to keep moving forward. So there are two primary outputs of Lean implementation. This is reducing waste, process waste, and cycle time, the time from when the trigger is order is placed to when the product is shipped, or however you might want to define it within your organization. And the reason that these two are so important, because obviously reducing process waste is going to make your operations more efficient so that you can do more with less. And by reducing cycle time, not only does that allow you to be more responsive to change in customer needs, but the fact that you can reduce the time from receiving an order to shipping product leads to the fact that you get paid sooner for the product that you deliver. So all really important benefits. Some Lean tools will just help us function more efficiently during the crisis as we're trying to figure out different ways to carry out our daily activities. You know, how do we make this work so it's not, you know, if not painful, at least less clunky. And then continued implementation of Lean. Because think about when you're implementing Lean, it's a mindset. It's a journey that the entire organization is traveling on. It flows down from management to the top management to the floor operator. It's about culture, it's about shared vision. And what's more important in this tumultuous time when you don't know from month to month what you're going to be dealing with, but knowing that you've got a stable culture, a stable team. Hey guys, we've got this. We may not know the answer, but having confidence that you can figure it out. So all very important benefits of implementing Lean. Okay, so I talked about, and I've broken this deck into two different sections. So business as usual, these are tools that you may have, these are some examples of tools that you're very likely using and how with slight modification, you can keep using them in the virtual arena. And then the second segment is discussing specifically how certain Lean tools can help you optimize your processes in this new work environment. So let's look at how we continue business as usual. Okay, so here is your traditional huddle board. For those of you who are implementing Lean, you've got something like this up. And for us, our discussion topics center around safety, quality, delivery, cost, and growth. And then to the right, we have our newsletter, where we would address any issues of concern or important new topics. And the way this works is every morning we'll meet, the executive management team will meet for anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, depending. It's always nice when you have no issues. That means the meeting goes by faster. But 5 to 15 minutes to check metrics, discuss any current or future issues, and plans for the day. And each department has their own huddle board where they meet daily. And then if there are any issues that can't be resolved at their level, they send it up to the executive management board, and that becomes something that's discussed as part of our newspaper. So how would we duplicate this in a virtual environment? Remember, we can't all huddle around the board anymore. That's the opposite of what we want to do during COVID. So let's take a look at how we would implement this virtually. And so here we have our safety cross and for the year. And you can see green is a good day, yellow is a near miss, and red is would be a reportable incident. And you can see that we have, for each tab, each chart that we had up on the physical huddle board, we now have a tab down below in this Excel spreadsheet. So we have scrap, complaints, NCMRs, on-time delivery, past due, lead times in work areas. There's a newspaper tab that's not shown on here. And we even have a few additional tabs because it's virtual, now we have more room. So we can have tabs for items that come up that are maybe more short term that are significant. So we have a tab for supplier shortages or material shortages, supplier issues. We have another tab for staffing. We trimmed down somewhat, now we're ramping up. We don't want to ramp up too fast, but orders are coming. Are we getting people in the pipeline to make sure that we have the capacity to meet our orders and so forth. So here was a fairly easy transition from the physical to the virtual. Next, please. Training within industry. So this was actually developed in the US to help ramp up production during World War II. How can we get people trained thoroughly and quickly to support the war effort? And what came out of this process was what's now known as training within industry. And the key tenets of training within industry are to develop job instruction breakdowns, which are detailed step-by-step ways to complete an activity. There's a certain way that training is implemented. The trainee is trained, and then they do teach back. There's very close interaction between the instructor and the student. So, and it's ongoing interaction. So how do you do that in an environment where you don't want to be close to people, that you want to minimize that. You want to minimize the interaction. You want to minimize how closely people are working together. And yet the need for quick training and to be able to cross-train throughout the site or throughout the organization is really critical in creating an agile and responsive organization. So you have a need, and you've got these issues around work environment that you have to overcome. So here you see this is actually a class for the trainers. So this is a train-the-trainer class. And the accommodations that we had to make were, it was meant to be an 8-person class. It was cut in half to 4. And hopefully you can see that we have acrylic screens up between each workstation. Obviously, everyone is wearing masks. You know, the instructor is keeping their distance. And of course, we had a ubiquitous hand sanitizer in the room. And so we had our first graduating class at the end of the year, which I think was appropriate. We actually rolled this program out for the first time last year, but it's totally appropriate that our first graduating class was at the end of 2020, or should I say, you know, COVID-20, because this is the type of tool that we need to really flourish in this new reality. Okay, next slide, please. Some other tools that really would be minimally impacted. Hoshin Conry, of course, long-term strategic planning, value stream mapping. It's going to be very clunky and frustrating. But for those key projects where you really need that information, you need that visual, it can be done. Standard work, absolutely critical. You have to have robust standard work because it's quite possible you're going to have more new people in different areas. If people have to be out quarantine because of COVID, or you know, we've had cases where some people retire early. We bring in contractors to fill certain needs. So you need to have robust standard work in practice, so that whether it's a new person or an experienced person or the same person day after day, they're doing the job consistently. And of course, leader standard work. I have found that incredibly useful during this. We've always used it, but I found it incredibly useful during this past year, because as you know, we're all juggling many more balls at the same time than we have ever before. And there are times when I start to get lost in all of it. You know, how do I prioritize this? What am how do I make sure nothing falls to the cracks? But then that leader standard work dials me right in. Okay, out of all these things, this is what needs to get done today, in addition to my standard meetings, reports, and other activities. So very valuable tool. And this is not impacted at all by a virtual reality. Okay, next. What tools have been most helpful to you during COVID-19? Let's hear from you guys.
The poll's been launched. Ask that you start voting. There's another, as long as we're voting, there was another application. I hope that I read this correctly, but it was called Euro. But whoever sent that, if they want to clarify that that was right, that perhaps could be used, that's helpful, I think, in some of the work that you have to do virtually.
And obviously, this is just a partial list. If there's some tool, lean tool, that has been monumental in supporting your efforts, please mention that in the chat as well.
Okay, got a couple seconds, almost done with the voting. And we'll close it. And not sure why it didn't launch. Can you help me with that, Annie? Thank you. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so value stream mapping, understanding workflow. I can see where that would be absolutely critical. 5S, well, value stream mapping, 21%. So 5S, 18%. Standard work, 30. Okay, and Kaizen, 13. And 19%, that's pretty much in line with the 21% that hadn't implemented Lean at this point. Okay, very good. Do you have any other suggestions from the chat box, Ellen?
Not that I see.
Okay,
Okay.
let's move on. Let's talk about some tools that I've identified.
Oh, excuse me, let me interrupt. It was, the one tool was MIRO. So there's a website here called academy.miro.com. Somebody else talked about using Kaizen Bingo, which is interesting. And they've had a lot of submissions in 2 months, so interesting. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, Kaizen Bingo, I love that. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. All right, adapting to COVID-19. And these ideas that I'm about to go through are meant to be some good examples, but by no means meant to be exhaustive. Just as you're coming up with different applications, different tools that are beneficial to you, I'm hoping that this is the start of a conversation, just to get the creative juices flowing. Wow, if he did this with this tool, what can I do with this other tool, and so forth. So let's take a look at some ideas that I came up with as I was preparing this deck. Okay, visual workplace. Any one of you want to take a guess out of the clear plastic wrap, the yellow plastic wrap, or the red plastic wrap? Which one of these injection molds is ready for use? I would hope that the answer is fairly obvious. And that's the power of the visual workplace. Remember, we talk about limiting interaction, limiting the unnecessary use of paperwork. Here you can walk up, you see without hesitation, which one is ready. And if you need the one that's in red or yellow, there's going to be some sort of standard work that tells you what you need to do to find out the status and get those issues resolved. But again, visual workplace, one picture's worth 1,000 words. I mean, that's a commonly used term, but it's really true. And if you've ever traveled internationally and realized how you can navigate just using images as opposed to knowing the language, you realize the power of the visual workplace. And in COVID-19, when we're trying to minimize our unnecessary interactions, this could be a powerful tool. Next slide, please. And what are the implications or the benefits of using visual management during COVID-19? As I said, less need for physical proximity, less need for speaking to one another, less need for touching computer screens and paper documents, and greater overall efficiency. Next slide, please. Layout. Now, this came from my own experience actually some years ago. And the scenario was we would test these, we made 8 syringes at a time, plastic injection molding. And we had a test fixture that would test 4 of these at a time. And so we were coming up, we knew we were about to have an increase in orders. And yet it was, we did not want to increase our workforce before we absolutely had to. So we looked at, well, what is our cycle time? And it was for a set of 8, the cycle time was on average about 55 minutes. And this was looking at different individuals across different shifts. Pretty consistently, it was about 55 minutes to get 8 done. And I was taking into account, breaks and that sort of thing. Yet, anytime that we had a case where we had to actually just rush and get 8 done for some reason, whether it's for a special test or get this last 8 done to meet a deadline, if we sat down and just worked on 8 parts, it took 25 minutes. So that was the fastest we could do it. And so we knew that there was a go-get there. So what's the difference between this 25-minute cycle time and 55 average cycle time? Obviously, it's process waste, but how do we eliminate it? So the first thing we did was we drew a crude image of the layout. And what you see here to the left is the first station. And so parts came in at the bottom of the screen, the far side of the metrology lab. They would go to the first station for one test, come over here to the top of the screen all the way to the right for another test, then back to the first station for the third test, then back to the fourth station, the second station for fourth test, and then over to this final station at the bottom for the last test. So you can see there's a lot of back and forth, it's not really efficient. And of course, your parts are all the way at the end of the room. Next slide, please. So we shifted so that the 3 technicians were at one long bench, and you can see how simpler the process workflow became. Then we were able to move the incoming parts to the location where previously one of the technicians was sitting. And we found by making these simple changes, we were able to get down to 35-minute cycle time. Now, after I had left, in the spirit of continual improvement, I heard back that they actually created a new fixture that would allow them to test 8 parts at a time instead of 4. And they also, at the time that I worked for the company, the injection molding cell was probably about a quarter mile away, way down the hallway. And they actually moved the metrology lab so that it was just across the hallway from the injection molding cell. So that dropped it even in half from what we had accomplished just through simple layout. So again, simple tool, thinking about workflow can make a huge difference. Now, in COVID-19, maybe you even went backwards, because remember, in some cases, we're going to have to be less efficient. So maybe this is your current state, and you might have to figure out, well, how can we spread people out to accomplish the same work. But again, whichever direction you're heading in, thinking about using the tool of layout can be very impactful during COVID-19. Next slide, please. And the implications: more efficient utilization of space and improved workflow both facilitate implementation of social distancing while still allowing for work to be accomplished as needed. Okay, next. 5S. So of course, the 5 S's are sort, where you remove any unnecessary items from the work area; set, logically organize any remaining material or items; shine, clean and sanitize the area. So there you're directly supporting COVID protocols; standardize, establish permanent practice and related instructions; and then sustain, maintain the improvement. This may be weekly, monthly 5S audits, that sort of thing. But it's a powerful tool to organize and sanitize a work area, which will lead to more improved operations. And this goes to not just the physical aspect of operating within a work cell, but also the intangibles. Think about it. At least for myself, I know I'm much more efficient when I have a clean and organized work area. For those times, which are inevitable, when the desk gets cluttered or things are all around, it's distracting, it can slow down your workflow, your individual workflow. So 5S can lead to increased efficiency, both physically and mentally. Next slide, please. So here's an example. You can see this is a fairly cluttered work center. And then after 5S, next slide, please. Wow. Fewer people are needed, and those people that are in the work area have more distance to space out. Next slide, please. Oh, back. There we go. So believe it or not, this is a clean room. And it's pretty dang cluttered. Now, it's true that this was in transition also. This wasn't normal daily operations, but it wasn't a lot better than this. Next slide, please. And then once 5S was implemented, and I'll pause here just to point out how much brighter it is, because they addressed some lighting issues when they did 5S as well. And one of the things that a lot of people overlook about 5S is when you talk about shine, that's not just cleaning an area, but it's also a maintenance activity. You know, do you have everything that you need? Are all of your tools in good condition? In this case, they looked at the lighting. Is the lighting adequate? So in addition to the reorganization, they also addressed the lighting deficiencies. Next slide, please. So what are the implications to implementing 5S during COVID? Well, it can help with all of these needs. Social distancing, as I pointed out, there's more, once you're more organized, you can spread out more. You can have less dense spacing of equipment. You're able to do more with less because you're more efficient. And 5S is just going to lead to a more clean and sanitized work area. So all outputs that support a successful COVID-19 work environment. Next slide, please. And in here, I won't go over the step by step, but think about your computer screens. How many of you have just a screen full of files? And when you're looking for certain things, of course, we put them on, oh, I use this all the time. Let's toss it on the desktop. And now suddenly you've got a desktop with 100 files, and it takes you almost as long as if you'd had to go to file folders and search for it. And we know that during the course of work, we have files that we refer to regularly for a period of time. But then when that need departs, those files remain on our desktops, in our computer folders, and there's a huge benefit not only to just processing power, but just to be able to find and organize your work, to actually 5S your computer. And this flowchart shows you one process flow that's fairly easy to go through to successfully 5S your computer. Next slide, please. So as you're thinking back on 2020, what has been your biggest impediment to implementing Lean during COVID-19?
And Lance, just as a reminder, we only have about 9 minutes left, so we want to leave a couple minutes, at least 5 minutes for questions.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just give it a couple more seconds here. About half have voted. Boy, you think a minute goes quickly unless you're staring at it. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. So there you go. Whoop. What happened? Oh, share. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, time. Management buy-in, 20%. Lack of expertise, conflicting priorities, or none. Okay, so just real briefly, conflicting priorities. I think that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because implementing Lean, it's a commitment, and there's huge value. Hopefully I've demonstrated that, or you know that from your own experiences. So, but it takes time, it takes commitment. And if you're working 60-hour weeks just to get the product out, then it's hard to put that structure in. So what you're really trying to do is find that balance. I would suggest, look for low-hanging fruit, quick wins, and things that actually will help. As I said, standard work helps me a lot. So maybe you're not rolling out an entire Lean program, or maybe some aspects of your Lean program may be put on hiatus, but use the individual tools, keep those mental muscles working, keep that Lean philosophy in play. So even if you can't fully implement it, you can at least achieve the benefits from it and keep that visibility within the management culture. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So recap, why Lean, why now? It can be a powerful tool in the fight against COVID-19. Lean allows for more efficient use of space, more efficient use of personnel, reducing cycle time to allow for more rapid response to customer needs. As I mentioned, the faster you get product, also, the faster you can get paid. And it helps to create well-organized and sanitized work areas. So if you're having problems with management buy-in, toss some of these benefits out there and maybe use some examples either from your own experience at other companies or previous experience in your own workplace. Next slide, please. And then the guiding principles really and truly support organizations that are trying to survive in COVID-19 environment. So reduce waste to improve efficiency. And this is something we need to know how to do more with less, more swiftly. Every month, that's a returning need or goal. Next slide, please. And of course, respect for the individual. We need everybody thinking of ideas to drive improvement, to mitigate risk. Tap into all of your resources, all of your subject matter experts, so that best practices and ideas rise to the top. And do follow the established guidelines to protect everyone. So Lean is not driving problems, it's helping resolve them during this new reality. Next slide, please. And that is all I have to say. Any questions?
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna throw a couple questions out. If we miss any, then we may send them to you, Lance, to respond. What would be substitutions for more in-person tasks such as Gemba walks, which involves employee communications?
Okay. Two ways you might address that. One thing that actually my site director did, which I thought was great, he had a video of the week where he would just go to an area. He'd do a little intro. It was almost like a reality show. He'd do a little intro, go to the area, people waving. He'd ask, what are you working on? What are your priorities today? You would see the work area, and you could gather a lot of information from it. So that would be one way to address it. And another would just be to still do Gemba walks, but have smaller groups and do them less frequently. And I think that's also important because the frontline employees want to see management out there, knowing, hey, we're still all in this together, not the frontline employees are, getting the product out, management is off somewhere huddled in their offices. So interactions are still important.
Let's see if I can find one more. Do you agree about the idea that the main output from Lean is delivering value to the customer, reducing waste and cycle time?
Yes, I would say yes. I would say that reducing waste and cycle time is going to are the outputs, and the result, I'm wordsmithing here, and the result is delivering increased value to the customer. But yes.
Okay, and we had a request, I don't know if there's a particular application or something or website for Kaizen Bingo. If you want to send that to one of our emails at ASQ, we might be able to send that out to everyone, whoever suggested that. And then another person was just making a comment about standard work documentation and making them virtual, trying to make them virtual. He happens to use something called Confluence, but he knows some of his partners are effectively using MS SharePoint. So getting instructions out of that dreadful binder has been very useful in making sure people have the current information. So that's a good suggestion.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that.
All right, well, thank you for that great presentation on things we can consider. And thank you also for some of your comments and insight in the audience. And again, you will receive the RU credits. You will receive an automatic email, probably in about 24 hours. You should get that. And remember that we've got a presentation again in March. This continues on despite COVID. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Lance. Have a great day.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you, Ellen and Manny, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, Lance.
My pleasure. Take care, my friend.
All right. Yeah, folks are logging off now. So, yeah, thanks, Lance. Like I said earlier, you should be hitting people up. I've sent your email address out several times. A lot of people miss questions. But I sent out your email. I sent out your phone number. I've told several people, including on I've told everybody, hey, ask Lance for the slides. YouTube video will be up by Friday. And what I'm going to do, Lance, too, is I'll send you the stats from this webinar. As you probably know, ASQ is very big on privacy, and therefore I'm supposed to remove the email addresses. Sometimes I forget that. So if I forget this case, just, I don't know, pretend they don't exist.
Yep, fair enough.
And we had, I think, 209 people at the total, which at the highest, which is what I remember as being, that's the highest I've seen in quite some time. So you'll see how long people have been on. I don't know if you've ever seen some of these data sheets, the spreadsheet that comes out, but it'll show poll questions. It'll show the people asking other questions. We ask questions on the way out, as you may know, like, hey, do you know any other presenters? Do you know, blah, blah, blah. So I'll send you all that.
Great.
And I can send you the raw recording if you want, or what I can do is if you said, oh, Manny, I really want this piece, I can edit it for you, throw in some titles or do something else if that will help you out.
No, I appreciate it. Just the raw recording is good.
I'm sorry, what was that you said?
No, I said getting the raw recording would be great. Thank you.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Other than that, I think we're good.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to disconnect and start to download some of that stuff, and I'll send it to you as it comes up. The recording probably will take an hour or so at least to get to it.
Do you get any feedback as far as thumbs up, thumbs down?
We see typically a lot of that. I didn't see a ton of them today. Thank you, thanks all, thank you, great job. Thank all of you, great thanks. Somebody else asked for Lance's contact information. This was a great presentation, refreshing, motivating. You'll see all this sort of stuff.
Okay, cool.
Somebody did ask about, do you see lean principles evolving in the future in a post-pandemic environment? I mean, just, I wish there were more time, obviously.
Yeah.
Because, I know everybody wants to get back to normal. It will never go back to normal, whatever normal was on February of 2020. I don't think it ever will, which is okay.
Yeah. Moving forward.
Well, yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll take what we've done and take the best out of this, which, oh, by the way, I don't know about you, but for me, I used to have to travel to all my clients, and I kind of like not having to sometimes. Yes. Especially if it's just for an hour-long meeting. Sometimes it takes as long to drive to the meeting as it does to have the meeting, So I'm not upset by some of that.
No, I agree. There's definitely some benefits come out of it.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, like I said, let me work on getting the stuff down. I will send it to you. So you should start seeing emails from me throughout the day.
Okay, well, appreciate it. And you have a great rest of the day, man.
Thank you, Lance. I hope you do the same. Take care. I'll talk to you later.
Right. All righty. Bye.